Hey friends, tonight we're climbing aboard the most overbooked, underventilated cruise ship in history, Noah's Ark. Not the cutesy Sunday school version with smiling giraffes and rainbows. No, tonight we're talking about the real Ark. 3 decks of chaos, questionable plumbing, and a smell that could knock out a camel at 20 paces. If you've ever wondered what it's like to survive the world's first and only global flood by sharing a floating barn with every animal on Earth, you're in the right place. Before we set sail, take a second to like, subscribe, and comment, but only if you're actually a believer. In bedtime stories that make you grateful for Fabrizi, let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever tried to sleep through a thunderstorm with a goat in your bed. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that gentle ark in a storm ambiance, and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet in, just in case the imaginary termites get any ideas. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would actually feel like to live on Noah's Ark? Did anyone ever get seasick? How many times did someone step in something unspeakable before breakfast? Was there a line for the bathroom? Or did everyone just give up? Could you survive 40 days of rain with your in-laws, 2 elephants, and a pair of skunks as neighbors? Would you last a single day without Wi-Fi? Or would you start a mutiny over the last dry blanket? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in 2348 BC. You're barefoot, slightly damp, and the only thing louder than the rain is the sound of a donkey snoring in your ear. Welcome aboard. Good luck. You wake up to the sound of 400 animals greeting the dawn, some with roars, some with bleats, and one rooster who thinks he's the captain. Forget your phone's gentle chime. This is more like being woken by a stampede in a petting zoo. You try to remember if you ever signed up for this cruise, or if you just lost a cosmic bet. The air is thick with the scent of damp straw, wet fur, and something you're pretty sure is llama breath. Your pillow, if you can call a bundle of hay tied with twine a pillow, has migrated halfway across the stall in the night, probably kicked by a restless sheep. You blink, trying to orient yourself. But the only thing you're sure of is that you're not in Kansas anymore, or Mesopotamia, or anywhere with a functioning snooze button. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and immediately regret it. The rooster, perched on a beam above your head, crows again, with the smug satisfaction of someone who's never heard of quiet hours. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays in protest, as if even he can't believe this is how mornings work now. You briefly consider negotiating with the rooster, but you remember that diplomacy is useless with poultry. The ark is alive with movement. Hooves clatter on wooden planks, wings flap, and there's a low, constant hum of animal conversation, like a group chat you can't mute. You hear the elephants trumpeting their morning opinions, the goats arguing over breakfast, and the lions yawning with a kind of menace that makes you grateful for sturdy cages. You wonder if anyone on board has invented earplugs, or if you'll just have to stuff your ears with leftover straw and hope for the best. You stumble to your feet, careful not to step on anything that might bite, sting, or squawk. The floor is sticky in places, suspiciously warm in others, and always slightly damp. You make a mental note to invent waterproof socks if you survive this. As you shuffle toward the main deck, you pass Noah's sons, who look just as bleary-eyed as you feel. Shem is trying to herd a pair of stubborn goats. Japheth is already arguing with a monkey over a stolen fig, and Ham is muttering something about never agreeing to this again. You try to remember your old morning routine. Coffee, maybe a scroll. A few moments of peace before the day began. Now, your morning routine is don't get trampled by a camel. and try not to inhale too deeply. You long for the gentle beep of your alarm clock, the soft glow of your bedside lamp, the luxury of not sharing your bedroom with a family of hedgehogs. Noah appears, looking suspiciously cheerful for someone who's been up since before dawn. He calls out a greeting, his voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "Rise and shine, everyone. Another beautiful day on the Lord's cruise ship." You're not sure if he's being sarcastic or if he's just lost touch with reality. Either way, you nod politely and try to look enthusiastic, even as a goat nibbles on your tunic. As the morning roll call continues, you realize that this is your life now, woken by a symphony of animal noises, stumbling through a maze of fur and feathers, and desperately clinging to the hope that someday, somehow you'll get to sleep in again. Until then, you resign yourself to the world's noisiest alarm clock, and the knowledge that, on the Ark, nobody gets a snooze button. It's time for breakfast. Bad idea. You wake up, stomach rumbling, and shuffle over to the buffet, a generous term for what's basically a pile of hay, a bucket of grain, and something in the corner that might have been a fig before the flood, but now looks more like a fossilized raisin with trust issues. You stare at the spread, trying to remember if you're a human or just another ruminant in the world's most ambitious petting zoo. You reach for the grain, hoping for a miracle. It's coarse, chewy, and tastes like someone tried to make oatmeal out of gravel. You chew slowly, pretending it's a trendy, ancient grain bowl from a hipster cafe. You even close your eyes and imagine a drizzle of honey, a sprinkle of cinnamon, maybe a side of avocado toast. But when you open your eyes, it's still just grain, and hay, and regret. The animals are already digging in. The goats are having a field day, literally. The sheep are chewing with the kind of enthusiasm you wish you could muster for your own breakfast. Even the camels look satisfied, and they're famously hard to please. You consider asking Noah if there's a gluten-free option, but you remember the last time you tried that. He just handed you a handful of barley and told you to count your blessings. Spoiler: barley is not gluten-free. You glance at the fig. It's shriveled, suspicious, and possibly older than Methuselah. You poke it with a stick. It doesn't move, which is reassuring, but you're still not convinced it's food. You think about the pre-flood days when breakfast meant fresh bread, olives, maybe even a little goat cheese if you were lucky. Now, breakfast is a test of faith, jaw strength, and your ability to pretend you're not jealous of the donkeys. You try to make conversation with your fellow Arkmates, but everyone's too busy chewing. The sound is somewhere between a construction site and a herd of cows at a salad bar. You wonder if anyone else misses coffee, or if you're the only one quietly mourning the loss of caffeine. You'd give anything for a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, even if it came with a side of camel hair. Noah wanders by, looking chipper. He's already had his breakfast, something called patience and trust in the Lord, which frankly doesn't sound very filling. He gives you a reassuring pat on the back and tells you the rain will stop soon. You nod, mouth full of hay, and try to look optimistic. But deep down, you know the only thing stopping soon is your will to eat another bite of this breakfast. You look around for alternatives. The chickens are guarding their eggs like tiny, feathered security guards. The cows are off limits. Noah made that very clear after the milk incident. You briefly consider foraging for mushrooms, but then remember the last time someone tried that. Let's just say the Ark doesn't have a poison control center. You sigh, take another bite of grain, and try to focus on the positives. At least you're not eating alone. At least the rain is drowning out the sound of your stomach protesting. At least you're not the one who has to clean up after the elephants. You finish your meal, feeling both full and strangely empty. You wonder if breakfast will ever be enjoyable again, or if you'll just learn to love the taste of hay. You remind yourself that this is all temporary, that one day you'll look back and laugh, or at least you'll look back and order pancakes. For now, you grab a handful of grain for the road, give the fig one last suspicious glance, and head off to face the rest of the day. After all, on the Ark, breakfast is just the beginning of your problems. Let's talk about fashion, or, as it's known on the Ark, whatever's not currently being chewed on by a goat. You wake up, stretch, and reach for your one and only tunic, a garment that, in theory, should be dry by now. In practice, it's somehow both damp and scratchy, like someone tried to invent a towel out of sandpaper and then left it in a puddle for 40 days. You slip it on and immediately regret your life choices. The fabric clings to you in all the wrong places, and you're pretty sure there's a mysterious stain that wasn't there yesterday. You try not to think about what animal it came from. Ark fashion is less biblical chic and more laundry day at a petting zoo. If you've ever wondered what it's like to wear a bathrobe that's been used as a napkin at a petting zoo birthday party, congratulations, you're halfway there. You look around at your fellow Ark dwellers. Noah is sporting the classic elder patriarch look, a robe that's seen better centuries, cinched with a rope that's probably doubling as a leash for the sheep later. Shem, Ham, and Japheth are all wearing variations on the I gave up aesthetic, tunics with suspicious patches, mismatched sandals, and hair that's been styled by humidity and despair. You briefly consider starting a new trend, the burlap toga. It's bold, it's breezy, and it's guaranteed to keep the goats guessing. Let's not forget accessories, the hottest item this season, the Ark poncho, a repurposed animal hide that's equal parts raincoat and conversation starter. It smells like wet dog and regret, but at least it keeps the rain off, sort of. You tie it around your shoulders and instantly feel 10% more waterproof, 90% more self-conscious. Shoes are a luxury. If you're lucky, you've got a pair of sandals that haven't been nibbled by the rabbits. If not, you're going barefoot, which is less earthy and more, I hope that's just mud. Every step is a gamble. Is it straw? Is it hay? Is it something you'll need to wash off immediately? Only time and your nose will tell. Laundry day is a group activity, mostly because there's only one bucket and everyone's fighting for it. You dunk your tunic in the water, give it a half-hearted swirl, and hope for the best. There's no soap, just faith and elbow grease. You hang it up to dry, but the humidity is relentless. After 3 days, it's still damp, but at least it smells slightly less like goat. You try to accessorize, but options are limited. A feather from the doves, too precious. A necklace made of olive pits, too soon. You settle for a jaunty belt made from leftover rope, which doubles as a handy tool for wrangling chickens. Function over fashion, as always. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle. The reflection is honest. Hair plastered to your forehead, tunic clinging in places you'd rather not discuss, and a general aura of, I survived another day. You give yourself a little nod. You may not be runway ready, but you're Ark ready. And really, isn't that what matters? As you shuffle off to breakfast, you pass by the elephants, who give you a look that says, we've seen worse. You take it as a compliment. After all, on the Ark, style is less about looking good and more about surviving the elements and the occasional goat attack. You adjust your poncho, square your shoulders, and strut past the chickens with all the confidence of someone who knows that, at the very least, you're not the one who smells like skunk today. And that, my friend, is Ark fashion, the original wet look. Who needs Paris when you've got puddles? Let's talk about bathrooms, or more accurately, the total lack thereof. Privacy is a distant memory. The facilities are a bucket, a prayer, and a hope that the elephants aren't watching. You've never missed indoor plumbing more. It's early morning on the Ark, and nature calls. Not politely either, more like a marching band parading through your kidneys. You look around your cramped corner, wedged between a pair of sheep and a crate of suspiciously judgmental chickens. There's no restroom sign, no gentle hum of fluorescent lights, no stack of 2-ply toilet paper waiting to cradle your dignity. There is, however, a bucket, a single battered wooden bucket. It's seen things, you can tell. You grab the bucket and shuffle toward the private area, which is just a slightly darker patch behind a curtain that's seen more action than a Jerusalem marketplace. The curtain is held up by a piece of twine and what you hope is not a snake. You duck behind it, knees creaking, and try to ignore the sound of a goat chewing something ominously close to your ear. There's no lock, there's no door. There's only the constant, unblinking gaze of a camel who seems to be silently judging your life choices. You try to make eye contact with the camel, hoping for a moment of solidarity, but he just blinks slowly, as if to say, "We're all suffering here, friend." You settle onto the bucket, which is somehow both too cold and too splintery. You try to relax, but the Ark is alive with noise. The distant roar of lions, the clatter of hooves, the unmistakable sound of someone arguing with a parrot. You wonder if anyone in history has ever longed for the gentle whir of a bathroom fan as much as you do right now. Just as you're about to find your moment of peace, the Ark lurches. The bucket slides an inch to the left. You grab the curtain for balance, which promptly falls down, revealing you in all your glory to a passing line of ducks. The ducks look unimpressed. You consider apologizing, but you're not sure if they speak your language. You finish as quickly as possible, dignity in tatters, and reach for the toilet paper. It's not charming. It's not even single ply. It's a handful of straw and a prayer. You do your best, but it's like flossing with pine needles. You make a mental note to invent wet wipes if you ever see dry land again. Now comes the worst part, disposal. There's no flush. There's no out of sight, out of mind. There's just you, a bucket, and a hatch that opens directly into the swirling waters below. You try to time your toss between waves, but the Ark rocks again, and you nearly baptize yourself in the process. You wonder if anyone would notice if you just left the bucket for Ham to deal with. You decide against it, barely. You return the bucket to its place of honor, right next to the feed sacks, and try to wash your hands with a damp rag that smells faintly of goat. There's no soap, just hope. You rub your hands together and pray that germs can't swim. You step back into the main deck, feeling both lighter and slightly traumatized. You pass Noah, who gives you a knowing nod. You realize that everyone on the Ark is united by one thing, the desperate, unspoken wish for a working toilet. You find your spot among the hay bales, grateful that at least you're not a skunk. You close your eyes and try to drift back to sleep, but the memory of the bucket lingers. You promise yourself that if you ever make it off this boat, you'll never take plumbing for granted again. Because on Noah's Ark, every bathroom break is a leap of faith, and sometimes that's the only thing keeping you afloat. Let's talk about chores. Not the take out the trash and maybe sweep the kitchen kind of chores. No, You're about to experience the original, Old Testament, ankle-deep in the mysteries of nature kind of chores. Welcome to Ark Sanitation, where the only thing more relentless than the rain is the steady supply of animal droppings. You wake up, stretch, and immediately regret it. The air is thick with the scent of hay, wet fur, and something you can only describe as prehistoric. You reach for your trusty shovel, your new best friend, your constant companion, your ticket to a workout routine that would make a CrossFit instructor weep. Forget Peloton. This is Shovelton. The Ark is divided into 3 decks, each one a little slice of zoological chaos. Your job? Keep it all clean, or at least less horrifying. You start on the lower deck, home to the elephants, hippos, and a pair of rhinos who have absolutely no sense of personal space. The floor is a patchwork of straw, mud, and, well, let's just call it organic matter. You take a deep breath, instantly regret that too, and get to work. Your first scoop is heavy, heavier than your dignity, which you left behind somewhere near the camel pen. You try to remember if Noah mentioned this in the job description. Must be comfortable working in a fast-paced, high-volume environment. Willingness to relocate. Must love animals. Shovel provided. You wonder if there's an HR department, or if the only complaint box is the one the goats keep eating. As you shovel, you develop a rhythm. Scoop, dump, sigh. Scoop, dump, question your life choices. The giraffes watch you with mild amusement, occasionally dropping gifts from a height that should be illegal. You consider filing a complaint, but the only authority figure is Noah, and he's busy patching a leak with what looks suspiciously like your last clean tunic. You pass Shem, who's elbow deep in the sheep pen, muttering something about unionizing. Ham is trying to convince the monkeys to help, but they're more interested in flinging things than cleaning them. Japheth is nowhere to be seen, which means he's either hiding or inventing the world's first excuse note. You try to keep your spirits up. After all, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? You repeat this to yourself like a mantra, even as you discover a pile that defies the laws of physics. You wonder if this is what sanctification feels like. Slow, messy, and occasionally soul-crushing. The animals, for their part, are no help. The goats follow you around, nibbling on your robe. The pigs seem to multiply every time you turn your back. The chickens have formed a union and are on strike until someone invents grain-free feed. You start to suspect the cats are judging you, but that's just business as usual. You pause for a moment, leaning on your shovel, and look around. Somewhere above, the rain drums on the roof. The ark creaks and sways, and you wonder if anyone has ever written a hymn about manure. You make a mental note. Great is thy faithfulness, even when the floor is not. By midday, you're covered in sweat, straw, and a few things you'd rather not identify. You've developed muscles you didn't know existed. You're pretty sure your sandals are now a biohazard. You consider starting a support group. Shovelers Anonymous, one day at a time. Finally, you finish your shift. You look back at your work, proud and exhausted. The ark is a little cleaner, the air a little less terrifying. You realize that, in a strange way, you're part of something bigger. A floating, smelly, miraculous mess that's somehow holding together. And as you hang up your shovel, you can't help but wonder, did Noah's sons ever consider mutiny over manure duty? Or did they just accept that sometimes surviving the flood means shoveling for the Lord? You can't make this up. The rain never stops. It's like living inside a giant tin roof with a leaky faucet. You try counting raindrops to fall asleep, but lose track somewhere around 12,000. You start to suspect the rain is personal. Every morning, you wake to the same relentless drumming overhead, a sound that's less gentle spring shower and more God left the faucet on and lost the wrench. The ark creaks and groans with every gust of wind, and you wonder if the whole thing is held together by faith, pitch, and a few optimistic nails. The air is thick and heavy, carrying the scent of wet wood, damp fur, and the faint, ever-present aroma of something died in the corner. But we'll deal with it after breakfast. You shuffle to the nearest porthole, hoping for a glimpse of blue sky. But all you see is grey. Grey clouds, grey water, grey mood. You try to remember what sunshine felt like. Was it warm? Did it smell like anything? Did it ever actually exist? Or was that just a collective hallucination from the pre-flood days? You start to fantasize about sunburns, sunglasses, and the luxury of dry socks. The constant rain has become the ark's unofficial soundtrack. It drowns out conversation, interrupts prayers, and makes every attempt at sleep feel like you're camping under a waterfall. You try to talk to Noah about it, but he just shrugs and says, 40 days, 40 nights, could be worse. You're not sure how, unless the rain started coming up from the floorboards too. You check, just in case. You attempt to distract yourself with chores, but even shoveling manure loses its charm when you're doing it to the beat of 1,000 raindrops. The animals seem to have mixed feelings about the weather. The ducks are thrilled, the cats are plotting revenge, and the sheep just look resigned. You overhear a pair of turtles debating whether to build a second smaller ark, just in case. At night, the rain is even louder. It's like trying to sleep inside a drum solo performed by a very enthusiastic toddler. You wrap yourself in your damp blanket, close your eyes, and try to imagine you're somewhere else, anywhere else. Maybe a desert, maybe a nice quiet cave, maybe even a tent in the backyard, as long as it's not raining. You start to notice the little things, the way the water seeps into every crack, the way your hair never quite dries, the way your socks have developed their own ecosystem. You wonder if you'll ever be dry again, or if you'll just evolve into some kind of amphibious human, perfectly adapted to life in a floating zoo. By day 30, you're convinced the rain is a test, not just of faith, but of patience, sanity, and your ability to find humor in the fact that your pillow now squelches when you lay your head down. You try to keep your spirits up, but even the animals are starting to look at you like, you did this, didn't you? And so, you settle in for another day of the world's longest shower, humming Rain, Rain, Go Away under your breath, and praying for a miracle, or at least a break in the clouds. Because on the ark, the only thing wetter than your socks is your sense of humor. Your cabin mates include 2 sheep, a pair of goats, and something in the corner that might be a porcupine. You learn the true meaning of close quarters when the skunks move in next door. You pray for a breeze. You always thought your old apartment had thin walls, but nothing compares to the ark's open concept living. There's no privacy, no personal space, and definitely no quiet hours. You're wedged between a sheep who snores and a goat with boundary issues. The sheep, bless them, are at least soft and mostly polite, but they have a way of chewing cud at 2 a.m. that makes you question your life choices. The goats, on the other hand, are chaos incarnate. They climb everything, eat anything, and have a talent for finding your last clean tunic and turning it into a chew toy. Then there's the porcupine, or at least, you think it's a porcupine. It's hard to tell in the dim light, and you're not about to get close enough to check. You give it a wide berth, hoping it's friendly, or at least indifferent. Every so often, you hear a rustle and a soft thunk as it rearranges its quills. You make a mental note to never, ever sleepwalk. But the real test of your patience comes when the skunks move in next door. You didn't know true fear until you heard the unmistakable sound of skunk feet shuffling on wood, followed by the slow creeping dread that comes with knowing your entire wardrobe now hangs in the balance. The skunks are surprisingly social, popping their heads over the divider to say hello, or, more accurately, to judge your hygiene. You try to be polite, but you also try to breathe through your mouth. The Ark is a masterclass in animal diplomacy. You quickly learn to negotiate for space, trade for the least offensive sleeping spot, and develop a sixth sense for when the goats are about to stage a midnight jailbreak. You become fluent in sheepish side-eye and goat glares. You also become an expert in strategic napping, catching a few minutes of sleep whenever the animals are distracted by something shiny, noisy, or edible. The smells are layered. There's the baseline aroma of wet fur, which is somehow both earthy and alarming. Then there's the sharp tang of goat, the musty undertone of sheep, and the ever-present threat of skunk. Every now and then, a breeze wafts through the Ark, and you feel a surge of hope, only to realize it's just the elephants on the other side, stirring up a fresh batch of natural air freshener. You try to keep your spirits up. You remind yourself that you're part of history, that you're doing important work, that someday people will tell stories about your bravery. But mostly, you just try to survive the night without getting poked, chewed, or sprayed. You start to fantasize about scented candles, open windows, and a world where your neighbors don't have quills or scent glands. By the end of the day, you've developed a new appreciation for walls, doors, and personal space. You also have a newfound respect for Noah, who somehow manages to keep the peace between lions and lambs, goats and porcupines, and you and your rapidly deteriorating sense of smell. You fall asleep to the gentle sounds of snoring sheep, the occasional goat bleat, and the distant, ominous shuffle of skunk feet, praying, as always, for a breeze. Noah calls a family meeting. It's less team building and more who forgot to feed the lions. You try to pay attention, but get distracted by a chicken pecking your sandal. You wonder if anyone's invented the mute button yet. You shuffle into the main gathering, space, which is really just a slightly less damp corner of the Ark, and take your place on a bale of hay that's seen better days. Noah stands at the front, clutching a wooden staff, and looking like he's about to deliver the State of the Ark address. Around you, the rest of the family assembles. Shem, Japheth, Ham, their wives, and a rotating cast of animals who seem to think they're invited. The goats are always early. The cats, predictably, don't show up at all. Noah clears his throat, and the room falls into a kind of uneasy silence. If you can call it silence when a donkey is chewing loudly in the background and a pair of doves are having a heated debate overhead. "All right, everyone," Noah begins. "We need to talk about the feeding schedule, and the manure situation, and the missing bucket." You glance around, trying to look innocent. You definitely didn't take the bucket. Probably. The meeting quickly devolves into chaos. Ham is arguing that he did in fact feed the lions, but the lions are giving him a look that says otherwise. Japheth is trying to organize a rota, but nobody can agree on who has to clean the bat enclosure. Shem is quietly negotiating a trade with the chickens, one extra scoop of grain for a promise to stop pecking everyone's toes. You, meanwhile, are just trying to keep your sandals intact. Noah attempts to restore order by raising his staff, but it's hard to command respect when a goat is nibbling on your robe. "Let's remember," he says, "we're all in this together." You nod. but you're not sure if he's talking to the family or the animals. The rooster crows in agreement, which is the closest thing to a group consensus you're likely to get. You try to focus on the agenda, but your mind wanders. You remember the days when family meetings meant sitting around a warm fire, maybe sharing a loaf of bread, not debating whose turn it is to scoop out the camel stall. You wonder if anyone else misses small talk about the weather, or if you're the only one who'd trade all the world's hay for a little peace and quiet. Noah moves on to Ark morale. He suggests singing a hymn or sharing words of encouragement. Ham proposes a nap instead. The suggestion is met with enthusiastic nods, especially from the sheep, who immediately lie down and start snoring. You consider seconding the motion, but Noah is already launching into a motivational speech about faith, perseverance, and the importance of not letting the monkeys near the grain stores. The meeting wraps up with a round of any other business, which mostly consists of complaints about the smell, the rain, and the fact that the giraffes keep blocking the view. Noah assures everyone that things will get better, that the rain will stop, and that, yes, he's working on a solution for the manure mountain. You try to look hopeful, but you're mostly just relieved the meeting is over. As everyone disperses, you realize that family meetings on the Ark are a lot like group chats. Too many opinions, not enough snacks, and always at least one person who's just here for the drama. You head back to your chores, grateful that, for now, you can mute the chaos, at least until the next roll call. And as you walk away, the chicken resumes pecking your sandal. Some things, you realize, are truly eternal. Let's talk about fun. There's no Netflix, no board games, just endless rounds of guess that smell and pin the tail on the actual donkey. You invent a game called How Many Times Can I Nap Today? Spoiler, not enough. Entertainment on the Ark is a creative exercise in low expectations. You wake up, stretch, and realize you've already completed the day's most exciting activity, not being trampled by a stampede of sheep. With no screens, no books, and no hope of a Wi-Fi signal, you're forced to rediscover the ancient art of making your own fun. Spoiler, it's mostly just trying not to lose your mind. The first game of the day is Guess That Smell. The rules are simple. Take a deep breath, make a wild guess, and hope it's not coming from your own tunic. Is it wet dog? Fermented hay? Something the elephants left behind? The possibilities are endless, and the winner gets the dubious honor of cleaning up whatever it is. You're pretty sure this is how detective work was invented. Next up is pin the tail on the actual donkey. It's exactly what it sounds like, except the donkey is not a willing participant. You chase him around the lower deck, blindfolded, while the chickens cheer you on and the goats try to eat the tail. It's less party game and more cross-training for future shepherds. You lose every time, but at least it's cardio. For the more introspective Ark dwellers, there's Ark charades. The challenge: act out an animal without getting trampled by the real thing. You mime a lion, only to be upstaged by an actual lion roaring in the background. You try to impersonate a dove, but the real doves take offense and stage a protest. You settle for pretending to be a sloth, which mostly involves lying very still and hoping nobody asks you to shovel anything. You invent a solo game called How Many Times Can I Nap Today? The answer is always not enough. Every time you find a quiet corner, someone needs help with a runaway goat, or the monkeys decide it's time for their hourly acrobatics. You start to fantasize about a nap so deep, not even the rooster could wake you. It remains a dream. For group activities, there's Ark karaoke. The playlist is limited to animal noises and whatever hymns Noah remembers. You belt out a spirited rendition of Old MacNoah Had an Ark, but the cows are tough critics. The monkeys, however, give you a standing ovation, mostly because they're standing on your head. If you're feeling competitive, there's who can find the cleanest spot to sit. It's a high-stakes game with no real winners. You think you found a dry patch, only to discover it's already been claimed by a family of hedgehogs. You move on, dignity slightly bruised. At night, you gather with the others for story time with Noah. He tells tales of the old world, cities, gardens, the mysterious concept of personal space. You listen, wide-eyed, as he describes a thing called theatre, where people would gather to watch stories unfold on a stage. You try to imagine it, but all you can picture is a bunch of goats in costumes. As the rain drums on the roof and the animals settle in, you realize that Ark entertainment is less about distraction and more about survival. You learn to laugh at the absurdity, to find joy in the smallest victories. A dry spot, a successful nap, a game of charades that doesn't end in disaster. And as you drift off to sleep, you remind yourself, on the Ark, every day is game night. You may not have Netflix, but you've got stories you'll never forget, and a front row seat to the world's weirdest variety show. The Ark rocks gently, or not so gently. You clutch your stomach and wonder if anyone's invented Dramamine yet. The only thing worse than seasickness is seasickness with a goat on your lap. At first, you thought the gentle swaying might be soothing, a lullaby from the waves, a rhythmic reminder that you're afloat and safe. But after the third day, the novelty wears off. The Ark doesn't just rock, it lurches, it pitches, it rolls like a camel with an itch it can't scratch. Every step is a gamble, every meal a potential regret. You've learned to walk with your knees bent and your arms out, like a toddler learning to dance, or a prophet trying to dodge divine slapstick. The animals, for the most part, seem unfazed. The ducks are in their element. The cats have found a way to nap through anything. And the goats, well, the goats are thriving. They treat every tilt of the Ark as an opportunity to climb onto something new, which is how you end up with a goat in your lap, just as the Ark takes a particularly enthusiastic dip. The goat looks at you with wide, innocent eyes, as if to say, "Isn't this fun?" You try to smile, but your stomach has other plans. You attempt to focus on the horizon, but there is no horizon. Just endless grey water and the occasional floating branch. You try deep breathing, counting backward, and even humming hymns, but nothing helps. The only thing that distracts you is the constant, low-level chaos. A monkey swinging from a beam, a rooster crowing defiantly at the storm, and Noah's sons arguing over whose turn it is to mop up after the elephants. Meals become a test of courage. You eye your bowl of grain, wondering if it will stay down or make a dramatic reappearance. The Ark lurches again, and you clutch your stomach, bargaining with the universe. If you let me keep this breakfast, I promise I'll never complain about dry land again. The universe, it seems, is not in a bargaining mood. You're not alone in your misery. Shem is green around the gills, Japheth is lying flat on his back, and even Ham, usually the picture of stoic endurance, looks a little pale. You exchange sympathetic glances, united by the shared experience of being tossed around like laundry in a storm. Noah, of course, is unflappable. He stands at the helm, feet planted wide, looking for all the world like he was born on a boat. You suspect he's secretly enjoying this. You try to find a comfortable spot, but comfort is a distant memory. Every surface is either too hard, too soft, or already occupied by an animal who got there first. You settle for a patch of straw, close your eyes, and try to will yourself into stillness. The ark rocks, your stomach flips, and the goat in your lap lets out a contented sigh. You wonder if seasickness is character building, or just another test you never signed up for. Eventually, you find a rhythm. Rock, sway, breathe, repeat. You remind yourself that this too shall pass. One day, the rain will stop, the ark will rest, and you'll set foot on solid ground again. Until then, you hold on tight, keep your eyes on the non-existent horizon, and try to keep your breakfast where it belongs. Because on the ark, you're not just rocked by the spirit, you're rocked by the waves, the goats, and the wild, unpredictable ride of survival. Dinner is served. It's mush. Again. You try to remember what flavor used to taste like. You consider trading your birthright for a single grape. Even the cows look unimpressed. You shuffle into the mess area, bowl in hand, and take your place in the slow-moving line of hungry, slightly damp ark dwellers. The chef, a title bestowed on whoever drew the short straw that day, stands behind a giant pot, ladling out generous helpings of something that could be barley, lentils, or possibly just yesterday's breakfast, rehydrated and rebranded. The color is somewhere between beige and despair. The texture is best described as ambitious porridge. The taste? Well, you stop trying to describe it after day 5. You sit down on a bale of hay, eyeing your bowl with a mixture of hope and resignation. The mush jiggles slightly, as if it's considering making a break for it. You poke it with your spoon. It doesn't fight back, but it doesn't exactly cooperate either. You take a bite. It's warm at least, and vaguely salty, but otherwise flavorless. A culinary blank slate. You try to imagine it's stew or soup, or literally anything else, but your imagination gave up somewhere around the 3rd week. Around you, the other Ark residents are equally uninspired. The cows sniff their troughs and turn away, unimpressed. The goats, ever the optimists, give the mush a tentative nibble before returning to their favorite pastime, chewing on your shoes. Even the pigs, who you thought would eat anything, seem to be drawing the line at Ark Mush, day 27. You remember the days before the flood, when meals had color, texture, and, most importantly, taste. You'd give anything for a handful of olives, a wedge of cheese, or a single, juicy grape. You briefly consider bartering with the doves for a sprig of something green, but they're holding on to their olive branches like precious family heirlooms. Conversation at dinner is sparse. There's only so much you can say about mush, and you've already compared notes on every possible variation. Today's batch is a little lumpier. I think I found a lentil. Is that flavor? It wasn't. You try to liven things up by suggesting a best mush recipe contest, but the only entry is add more salt, and you're already out. Noah tries to keep spirits high, reminding everyone that sustenance is a blessing and that the Lord provides. You nod dutifully, but you can't help but wonder if manna from heaven would be too much to ask. Even a sprinkle of herbs, a dash of spice, anything to break the monotony. You finish your bowl, scraping the sides for any hint of variety. You watch as the animals settle in for the night, some content, some plotting their next escape. You make a mental note to check the stores tomorrow. Maybe there's a forgotten fig, a rogue date, or a miracle hiding in the bottom of a barrel. As you lay down to sleep, your stomach full, but your taste buds longing for adventure, you dream of feasts, roasted vegetables, honey cakes, sweet grapes bursting with juice. But when you wake, it'll be mush again. 40 days, 40 nights, and 40 shades of mush. You sigh, pull your blanket a little tighter, and remind yourself, someday there will be flavor again. For now, you survive. One bowl of mush at a time. Let's talk about bathing. It's a bucket, a rag, and a prayer. You try to wash your hair, but the water smells suspiciously like camel. You wonder if anyone will notice if you just give up. Personal hygiene on the Ark is less spa day and more survival challenge. You wake up sticky, itchy, and with hay in places hay should never be. You eye the communal wash bucket, which sits in the corner like a dare. The water is cold, slightly murky, and always seems to have a mysterious floating hair, species unknown. You try not to think about it as you dunk your rag, wring it out, and brace yourself for the world's least refreshing sponge bath. Privacy is a distant memory. The sheep stare, the goats judge. The chickens seem personally offended by your attempts at cleanliness. You try to carve out a little space behind a hanging sheet, but the sheet is damp, and the porcupine keeps poking its nose under the edge. You sigh and scrub as quickly as possible, hoping to finish before the next round of animal spectators arrives. Washing your hair is a whole separate ordeal. You scoop up a handful of water, only to realize it smells faintly of camel and strongly of not quite clean. You lather up with what passes for soap, a lump of something that might once have been olive oil and ash, and do your best. The suds don't last long, and neither does your patience. Rinsing is an exercise in futility. No matter how many times you pour water over your head, you're never quite sure if you're cleaner or just wetter. You try to keep your spirits up. Maybe this is good for your skin, you tell yourself. Maybe this is how people discover new beauty routines. The Ark method. Bathe like you mean it. You imagine opening a spa someday, offering bucket baths and hay exfoliation. You're not sure it'll catch on, but at least you'd have the world's most authentic backstory. Laundry is just as challenging. You dunk your tunic in the same bucket, swish it around, and hope for the best. There's no soap left, so you settle for a vigorous rinse and a prayer. You hang your clothes to dry, but the air is so damp that dry is more of a concept than a reality. You start to wonder if mildew is a fashion statement. You look around at your fellow Ark dwellers. Noah seems to have accepted his fate, sporting a beard that could hide a family of sparrows. Shem, Ham, and Japheth have all adopted the just embrace it approach, comparing stains like badges of honor. You consider joining them, but a stubborn part of you clings to the hope that you might emerge from this adventure with at least a little dignity, and maybe, just maybe, a clean pair of socks. By the end of your bath, you feel, well, not clean exactly, but at least slightly less sticky. You towel off with a scrap of linen, pull on your damp tunic, and try to ignore the lingering scent of camel. You remind yourself that everyone is in the same boat, literally, and that someday, when the rain stops and the sun comes out, you'll find a real river, a real bar of soap, and maybe even a little peace and quiet. Until then, it's you, a bucket, and the unwavering hope that nobody gets close enough to notice you've given up. Because on the Ark, hygiene is a team effort, and the team is losing. Night falls at last, and a hush settles over the Ark. Well, as much of a hush as you can expect when you're sharing a floating barn with hundreds of animals. The lions yawn and curl up, the sheep nestle together, and the goats finally stop plotting their next escape. For a moment, you almost believe you might get some rest. Almost. But just as you're drifting off, the owls start their nightly symphony. Their hoots echo through the rafters, a haunting lullaby that's less soothing woodland melody and more midnight alarm clock with feathers. You pull your damp blanket up to your chin and try to tune them out, but it's no use. The owls are wide awake, and they want everyone to know it. You shift on your makeshift bed, a pile of straw that's seen better days. It pokes and scratches in all the wrong places, but you've learned to live with it. What you haven't learned to live with, however, are the lice. They're the true night shift on the Ark, and they take their job very seriously. Just as you're about to fall asleep, you feel the first telltale itch, then another, and another. Soon, you're scratching like a dog with a flea collar that's lost its will to fight. You try to ignore it, telling yourself that lice are just another part of the Ark experience, like soggy tunics and goat-related property damage. But it's hard to feel philosophical when you're being eaten alive by invisible pests. You start to miss your old mattress, even if it was just straw. At least back then, the only thing you had to worry about was the occasional mouse, not a full-scale insect invasion. You glance around at your fellow Ark dwellers. Some are snoring, blissfully unaware of the lice. Others are tossing and turning, scratching in their sleep. You spot Noah, sitting quietly by a lantern, reading a scroll and looking remarkably unbothered. You wonder if he has a secret stash of anti-lice oil, or if he's just ascended to a higher plane of patience. The night air is thick with the sounds of the Ark, the soft breathing of animals, the creak of wood, the distant drip of rain. Every now and then, a restless animal stirs. A donkey brays. A rooster mutters in his sleep. A porcupine rustles in the corner. You try to focus on the rhythm of the Ark, letting it lull you into a kind of uneasy peace. But the lice are relentless. You scratch and sigh, resigning yourself to another sleepless night. You promise yourself that if you ever see dry land again, you'll invent a better mattress, maybe even a pillow, and definitely some kind of lice repellent. Eventually, exhaustion wins out. You drift into a fitful sleep, dreaming of soft beds, clean sheets, and a world without owls or lice. Tomorrow will bring another day of rain, chores, and animal drama. But for now, you let the Ark rock you gently, hoping that morning will come quickly. Because on the Ark, nighttime is less about rest and more about survival. And if you're lucky, you'll wake up with only a few new bites. And maybe, just maybe, a little more patience than you had the day before. Rumors spread faster than mildew. Someone's hiding the good hay. The doves are giving you side-eye. You realize the Ark is basically a floating reality show, minus the confessionals. It starts innocently enough. One morning, you notice the hay in your corner is a little lackluster. It's damp, a bit moldy, and definitely not the premium stuff you saw Noah stashing away on loading day. You shrug it off. Maybe you just got unlucky in the hay lottery. But then you see the cows lounging on a pile of golden, fragrant, practically Instagram-worthy hay. The kind of hay that makes you question your place in the Ark's social hierarchy. You mention it to Ham, who leans in and whispers, "I heard the goats are hoarding the good stuff. They've got a secret stash behind the water barrels." You glance over at the goats, who are chewing with suspicious satisfaction. One of them winks. You're not sure if it's a friendly wink or a warning. By lunchtime, the rumor mill is in full swing. The chickens claim the rabbits are bribing the donkeys for access to the hay vault. The donkeys insist it's the llamas, who have always been a little too quiet for comfort. The doves, meanwhile, are perched overhead, watching everything with beady-eyed judgment. Every time you walk by, they coo in a way that sounds suspiciously like, "We know what you did." You try to keep your head down, but it's impossible to avoid the drama. Japheth is interrogating the sheep, who just bleat innocently and pretend not to know what hay even is. Shem is organizing a hay audit, which mostly involves poking around in corners and getting sneezed on by the cats. Noah, for his part, is trying to stay above the fray, but even he can't resist a little side-eye when he sees the camels munching on something suspiciously fresh. The tension is palpable. Every time someone finds a new bale, a crowd gathers, sniffing and poking and arguing over whether it's the good stuff. You overhear the pigs plotting a midnight raid, while the monkeys are running a black market hay exchange in the rafters. You start to wonder if you should just give up and eat the straw from your own bedding. The doves, of course, are the worst. They glide around like they own the place, dropping cryptic hints and acting like they're above it all. You catch them whispering to the squirrels, who immediately scamper off with a suspiciously large bundle of hay. You try to confront them, but they just flutter their wings and look away, as if to say, "We don't get involved in terrestrial squabbles." By evening, the Ark is abuzz with conspiracy theories. Did Noah's wife hide a stash for her favorite animals? Are the elephants using their trunks to smuggle hay between decks? Is there a secret hay speakeasy behind the giraffe pen? You start to suspect everyone, even the turtles, who have been looking a little too smug lately. You realize, with a mix of amusement and exasperation, that the Ark is basically a floating reality show. There's drama, alliances, betrayals, and more side-eye than a season of Survivor. The only thing missing is a camera crew and a confessional booth where you can vent about your hay woes. As you settle down for the night on your less than premium bedding, you make a mental note. Trust no one, especially not the goats. And if you ever get off this boat, you're starting a new rumor. One where you were the mastermind behind the great hay heist of the flood. Because on the Ark, the real flood isn't water, it's gossip. You check the weather. It's raining. Again. You wonder if the sun is just a myth. You start to dream about towels, sunshine, and a world where your socks are dry. Every morning, you wake up with a sliver of hope. Maybe today will be different. Maybe the clouds will part, a golden ray will shine through, and you'll remember what it feels like to be warm and dry. You shuffle over to the nearest porthole, peer out, and yep, still raining. Not just a drizzle either. This is a full-on biblical deluge, the kind that makes you wonder if you should start building a second Ark just in case. The official Ark weather report is always the same. Morning, rain, afternoon, rain, evening, rain, overnight. Surprise, more rain. You try to keep track of the days, but the endless grey blurs them together. Is it Tuesday, the third Thursday of the flood? Day 27 of Noah's wet and wild adventure? You've lost count. All you know is that your socks have been damp for so long, you're pretty sure they've evolved gills. You start to fantasize about towels. Not just any towels. Fluffy, sun-warmed, lavender-scented towels that wrap you up like a hug from the Almighty. You dream about sunshine, about lying in a field of grass so dry it crackles under your toes. You imagine a world where airing out doesn't mean standing under a leaky beam and hoping for the best. The animals are handling it in their own ways. The ducks are living their best lives, the frogs are throwing pool parties, and the sheep have resigned themselves to perpetual frizz. The cats glare at the rain as if it's a personal insult, and the dogs have started a betting pool on when the first rainbow will appear. The smart money's on, not any time soon. Noah tries to keep spirits up. He organizes sunshine appreciation circles, where everyone sits in a circle and describes what they remember about the sun. It was warm, someone offers, and yellow, another adds. You all nod, misty-eyed. as if recalling a long-lost friend. You try to dry your clothes by hanging them near the lanterns, but all you get is warm and wet instead of dry and warm. Your sandals squelch with every step, and you've started rating puddles by depth and temperature. You consider inventing the world's first umbrella, but the goats eat your prototype. At night, you dream of blue skies and sunbeams. You wake up to the steady, relentless drumming of rain on the roof. You sigh, pull your damp blanket tighter, and remind yourself, this too shall pass. Someday the rain will stop, the sun will return, and you'll finally know the joy of dry socks. Until then, you resign yourself to the Ark's one and only weather report. 100% chance of wet, and maybe, just maybe, a 1% chance of hope. Noah's sons are at it again. Today's event. Who can shovel the fastest? You place your bets, but everyone's a loser when the prize is more chores. You consider switching teams. It starts innocently enough. Just another dreary day on the Ark. The rain drumming its endless rhythm. The animals providing their own unique soundtrack. You're halfway through your morning routine, which mostly involves dodging goats and searching for dry socks, when you hear the telltale sounds of brotherly competition echoing down the main deck. Shem, Ham, and Japheth have invented the Archaeologicals, a series of events designed to answer the age-old question, who's the best at doing chores nobody wants to do? Today's main event, the Great Shovel-Off. The rules are simple. Whoever clears their section of the elephant enclosure first wins. The prize, bragging rights, and ironically, the honor of shoveling the next section too. You suspect Noah had a hand in designing the reward system. You and a few other Ark dwellers gather to watch, placing bets with whatever you have on hand. Half a stale biscuit, a feather, the promise of first dibs on the next dry blanket. The animals seem invested too. The goats are lined up ringside, munching on hay and looking for opportunities to help. The chickens are taking side bets. Even the usually aloof cats have slunk in to observe, tails twitching with anticipation. Noah's sons take their places, shovels at the ready. Shem, the eldest, is all business. Methodical, focused, determined to prove that age equals wisdom, or at least better shoveling technique. Ham, the middle child, is all energy and bravado, swinging his shovel like he's auditioning for a spot in the Ark's non-existent marching band. Japheth, the youngest, is the wild card. He's got speed, but also a tendency to get distracted by, say, a passing butterfly or a particularly interesting pile of straw. Noah blows a ram's horn, because of course he does, and they're off. Shovels fly, straw scatters, and the air fills with the unmistakable aroma of competitive spirit and elephant. You cheer for your favorite, but it quickly becomes clear that nobody is winning, least of all the spectators, who are now in the splash zone. Shem works steadily, carving neat rows and muttering motivational psalms under his breath. Ham tries to outpace him, but ends up flinging a generous portion of material onto Japheth's side, sparking a brief but intense shoveling skirmish. Japheth retaliates by launching a counter-offensive of goat droppings, and suddenly the Archaeologics have turned into the world's least glamorous food fight. Noah watches from a safe distance, arms crossed, a faint smile on his face. You get the feeling he's seen this all before. Maybe sibling rivalry is just another part of God's grand design. Or maybe it's the only way to survive months at sea with nothing but chores and each other for company. Eventually, the contest devolves into laughter, groans, and a general agreement that everyone is equally terrible at shoveling. The prize, more chores, is met with groans, but also a grudging sense of camaraderie. You consider switching teams, but realize that on the Ark, there's only one team. Teams survive until dry land. As the brothers trudge off to their next event, you shake your head and smile. The Ark Olympics may not have medals, but they've got heart, humor, and just enough chaos to keep everyone sane. And as you head back to your own chores, you make a mental note. Next time, bet on the goats. They always find a way to win. The lions are fighting with the tigers. The goats are plotting something. You try to mediate, but end up refereeing a chicken wrestling match. You wonder if this is what Noah meant by peaceful coexistence. You always imagined the ark as a floating haven of harmony. Lions lying down with lambs, doves cooing sweetly. Everyone getting along in a kind of pre-rainbow utopia. Reality, as it turns out, is a little less Garden of Eden and a little more zoo at feeding time after a power outage. It starts with the lions. They're majestic, regal, and absolutely convinced that the best straw belongs to them. The tigers, not to be outdone, stake their claim to the same corner. You try to reason with them, but it's hard to mediate when both parties communicate exclusively in growls and tail flicks. You attempt to draw a line down the middle with a broom, but the only thing you accomplish is making the goats laugh. Speaking of goats, they're up to something. You catch them huddled together, whispering in low bleats and glancing suspiciously at the grain sacks. You're pretty sure they're plotting a coup, or at least a midnight snack raid. You try to keep an eye on them, but they scatter the moment you get close, pretending to be innocent. You're not fooled. No one is that interested in a patch of empty floor. Meanwhile, the chickens have decided to settle their own disputes the old-fashioned way, with a wrestling match. You find yourself in the middle of a feathery free-for-all, trying to separate two particularly feisty hens, while the rooster acts as an overly enthusiastic announcer. You consider introducing a no-pecking rule, but enforcement is tricky when you're outnumbered and outbeaked. The elephants, to their credit, try to keep the peace by trumpeting loudly whenever things get out of hand. This only serves to startle the rabbits, who stampede in every direction, causing a domino effect that ends with a pile of disgruntled sheep and one very confused porcupine. Noah, ever the optimist, calls for a family meeting to discuss conflict resolution strategies. His suggestions include sharing, taking turns, and using our words. The lions yawn, the goats roll their eyes, and the monkeys start miming dramatic reenactments of the day's arguments. You try to take notes, but your quill is stolen by a particularly enterprising ferret. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. You've broken up 3 animal squabbles, negotiated a truce between the cats and the dogs with limited success, and confiscated a suspiciously sharp stick from the goats. You collapse onto your bunk, wondering if peaceful coexistence is just a polite way of saying organized chaos. As you drift off to sleep, you hear the distant sound of lions grumbling, goats plotting, and chickens settling their differences with one last half-hearted peck. You smile, realizing that maybe this is what coexistence really looks like. Not perfect harmony, but a daily dance of compromise, negotiation, and the occasional chicken wrestling match. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because on the Ark, survival isn't just about weathering the storm. It's about learning to live with your neighbors, fur, feathers, fangs, and all. Let's talk about smells. The Ark has its own ecosystem of odors: wet fur, old hay, and something you can't identify but hope is just the turtles. You try to invent a new air freshener: flooded barn. From the moment you step onto the Ark, your nose is assaulted by a symphony of scents that defy description, and sometimes the laws of nature. The baseline aroma is wet dog, but that's just the overture. Layered on top are notes of damp straw, muddy footprints, and a persistent undertone of something died, but we're not sure where. It's the kind of smell that seeps into your clothes, your hair, your very soul. You try to adapt. At first, you breathe through your mouth, but that only works until you realize the air tastes like barn too. You consider stuffing your nose with hay, but the goats beat you to it. You try to convince yourself it's earthy, natural, maybe even rustic. But there's nothing rustic about a skunk and a wet sheep sharing a corner. Every animal brings its own contribution to the Ark's olfactory orchestra. The elephants, a heavy, musky scent that lingers long after they've lumbered away. The goats, sharp, tangy, and somehow always stronger near your sleeping quarters. The chickens, a mix of feathers, dust, and existential dread. The cats, subtle, but with a hint of judgment. The turtles, mysterious. You hope it's just the turtles. Then there's the ever-present humidity. The rain never stops, so everything is just a little bit damp, all the time. Mildew becomes a roommate. Your sandals squelch. You start to wonder if you'll ever smell fresh again, or if you'll just have to accept your new signature scent. Oh, the flooded barn. In a moment of desperation, you try to invent your own air freshener. You gather wildflowers, the goats eat them. Sprinkle some crushed mint leaves, the sheep trample them. And even hang up a few pine branches, the monkeys swing from them. Nothing works. The Ark's natural aroma is too powerful, too persistent, too alive. You start to fantasize about the simple pleasures of pre-flood life. The smell of fresh bread, a field of wildflowers, even a whiff of your neighbor's overcooked stew. You'd give anything for a breeze, a spritz of perfume, or a single bar of soap that doesn't double as camel shampoo. Noah, ever the optimist, claims you'll get used to it. It's the smell of life, he says, taking a deep breath and smiling bravely. You nod, but secretly vow to invent the world's first deodorant as soon as you hit dry land. Until then, you do your best to embrace the chaos. You learn to identify animals by scent alone. You develop a sixth sense for when the wind shifts, run from the pig pen. You even start a running joke with the others. What's that smell? Don't ask. Because on the Ark, you're not just surviving the flood, you're surviving the smells. And someday, when you finally step onto dry land, you'll take your first deep breath of fresh air and know, without a doubt, that you've truly been delivered. You start to miss the outside world, dirt, grass, even mosquitoes. You never thought you'd long for a sunburn. You wonder if you'll ever see a tree again, or if you'll just become part of the Ark's furniture. At first, the Ark was an adventure, a grand, if slightly damp escape from the ordinary. But as the days blur together, you find yourself staring out the porthole, searching for anything that isn't grey water or grey sky. You'd give anything for a patch of mud, a whiff of wildflowers, or the simple pleasure of tripping over a tree root. You start to daydream about things you never appreciated before. Dirt under your fingernails. Not manure, not mysterious Ark muck, but honest-to-goodness earth. Grass stains, the kind you used to complain about when doing laundry, now elevated to the status of luxury. Mosquitoes, yes, even them. You gladly swap Ark lice for the familiar whine of a mosquito in your ear. Sunburns. You imagine the sting of too much sun on your shoulders, the way your skin would peel, and you sigh with nostalgia. Trees, tall, leafy, and gloriously rooted in something solid. You wonder if you'll ever sit in the shade again, or if your future is just endless planks and pitch. You catch yourself sniffing the air, hoping for a hint of green, a trace of pollen, anything that isn't the scent of wet wood and animal funk. You start to envy the doves and ravens, who at least get to fly out and see if there's anything new on the horizon. You consider asking Noah if you can be the next test subject. Just toss you out the window and see if you come back with an olive branch or at least a good story. Your fellow Ark dwellers are feeling it too. Conversations drift toward memories of home, favorite trees, secret swimming holes, the way the wind used to rattle the shutters at night. Even the animals seem restless. The horses paw at the floor, the cats stare longingly at the rain, and the dogs whine at the door, as if they remember what it was like to run free. You start to worry you're becoming part of the Ark itself, just another fixture, like the creaky beams and the ever-present buckets. You imagine future generations stumbling upon the Ark and finding you fossilized in a corner, clutching a handful of straw and muttering about grass. But then you remind yourself, this won't last forever. The rain will stop, the waters will recede, and someday you'll set foot on solid ground again. You'll feel the sun on your face, dirt between your toes, and maybe, just maybe, you'll never take the outside world for granted again. Until then, you hold on to your daydreams, because sometimes the only thing keeping you afloat is the hope of dirt, grass, and a sunburn, waiting just beyond the horizon. A leak springs in the roof. Noah grabs his toolkit, which is mostly just a hammer and hope. You hold a bucket and pray. You realize you're living in the world's first home improvement show, and nobody's winning. It starts with a drip. Just one, at first. Soft, rhythmic, almost soothing. You try to ignore it, but then it's joined by another, and another. Soon, it's a symphony of drips, each one landing with a splash that echoes through the Ark like a tiny, watery taunt. Noah, ever the optimist, springs into action. He's got his toolkit, which consists of a hammer, a couple of wooden pegs, and a look of grim determination. You're assigned the all-important job of bucket holder, which is less glamorous than it sounds and a lot wetter. Step 1. Locate the leak. This involves a lot of squinting at the ceiling, climbing on precarious stacks of hay, and getting dripped on repeatedly. The goats offer to help, but mostly just get in the way. Step 2. The patch job. Noah hammers a peg into the leak. The leak laughs and moves 2 feet to the left. You shuffle the bucket accordingly, wondering if this is what Sisyphus felt like. Step 3. Creative solutions. Out of pegs, Noah tries stuffing the hole with spare wool, a handful of feathers, and at one point, a very confused squirrel. Nothing works. The drip persists, relentless and smug. Step 4. The team effort. The whole family gets involved. Ham suggests using pitch, Japheth votes for prayer, and Shem just wants to move to a drier corner. The animals offer moral support, and more leaks. You're living in the world's first home improvement show, and nobody's winning. There's no commercial break, no cheerful host, and definitely no big reveal at the end. Just more buckets, more leaks, and the creeping suspicion that the Ark's warranty expired the moment the rain started. As you empty your bucket for the 3rd time tonight, you look at Noah, hair plastered to his forehead, hammer in hand, hope in his eyes, and you can't help but laugh. You may not have a perfect roof, but you've got stories to last a lifetime. And hey, at least you're not the squirrel. Let's talk about romance. Privacy is impossible, and the smell is worse. You try to write a love note, but the ink runs in the humidity. You settle for a smile across the hay bales. Love on the Ark is not for the faint of heart, or the sensitive of nose. Every attempt at intimacy is, interrupted by the bleating of goats, the squawking of chickens, or the unmistakable aroma of wet everything. You'd think that being trapped together for 40 days and nights would spark some epic love stories. Instead, it's mostly awkward glances and whispered conversations drowned out by elephant snores. You try to get creative, maybe a moonlit stroll. Unfortunately, the only moonlight is what filters through a crack in the hull, and your stroll is more of a careful tiptoe around sleeping animals and suspicious puddles. You consider serenading your beloved, but the only instrument available is a goat-chewed lyre, and your audience is a trio of unimpressed cats. You attempt to write a love note, pouring your heart out onto a scrap of parchment, but the ink runs in the relentless humidity, turning your heartfelt confession into a Rorschach test. You briefly consider switching to interpretive dance, but the last time you tried, you slipped on a patch of hay and landed in the pig pen. Not your most romantic moment. Privacy is a luxury no one can afford. Every corner of the ark is occupied by animals, by family, by the ever-watchful doves who seem to have appointed themselves chaperones. You try to steal a moment alone, but there's always a sheep in the way, or a monkey swinging overhead, ready to drop something unmentionable at the worst possible time. So you settle for the small things: a smile across the hay bales, a shared laugh over the latest goat escapade, a gentle squeeze of the hand when no one's looking. You exchange whispered promises of dry land and fresh air, of gardens and quiet evenings under the stars. For now, romance is less about grand gestures and more about surviving together, finding beauty in the chaos and hope in each other's eyes. You realize that love on the ark isn't about candlelit dinners or poetic declarations. It's about patience, resilience, and the ability to find joy in the midst of mud and mayhem. It's about holding on to each other when the world is literally underwater, and believing that someday you'll have a story to tell that's even better than the flood itself. And as you settle in for another night, surrounded by snoring animals and the gentle rocking of the ark, you catch your beloved's eye across the room. You both smile, and in that moment, it's enough. Because sometimes, love is just a smile across the hay bales, and the promise of brighter days ahead. You're jolted awake by the sound of hooves. The zebras are having a midnight sprint. You try to go back to sleep, but the monkeys have other plans. You start to wonder if insomnia is just part of the ark experience. It's the middle of the night. The ark creaks and rocks gently, rain tapping a steady rhythm on the roof. For a fleeting moment, you think you might actually get some rest. Then, thunder. Not from the sky, but from the lower deck. A herd of zebras, apparently struck by a collective bout of midnight energy, has decided it's time for a sprint. You sit bolt upright as the thunder of hooves echoes through the wooden planks, rattling your teeth and your last nerve. You pull your blanket over your head and pray for peace, but the ark has other ideas. The monkeys, inspired by the commotion, launch into their own acrobatics routine. They swing from beams, chatter at the top of their lungs, and occasionally drop something suspiciously sticky onto unsuspecting sleepers below. You try to ignore them, but it's hard to sleep when you're worried about being pelted by a half-eaten fig. You glance around at your fellow ark dwellers. Some are snoring through the chaos, blissfully unaware. Others are sitting up, bleary-eyed and resigned, exchanging silent looks that say, "Again." Noah, ever the optimist, mutters something about the beauty of God's creatures and tries to go back to sleep. You suspect he's developed selective hearing. The stampede finally subsides, but the peace is short-lived. The goats, never ones to miss out on excitement, start a headbutting contest. The chickens, startled awake, begin a chorus of indignant clucking. Somewhere in the shadows, a donkey brays in protest, as if to say, "Some of us are trying to sleep here." You try every trick you know. Counting sheep, they're too busy arguing with the goats. Deep breathing, the air smells like wet fur and regret. And even humming lullabies, the owls join in, off-key. Nothing works. The ark is alive with the sounds of restless wildlife, and sleep feels like a distant memory. You start to wonder if insomnia is just part of the ark experience. Maybe it's a rite of passage, like bucket baths and mush for dinner. Maybe, centuries from now, people will talk about the legendary sleeplessness of the ark, and you'll be a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks sharing a boat with a zoo is a good idea. Eventually, exhaustion wins out. The animals settle, the rain softens, and you drift into a fitful sleep, dreaming of quiet nights and soft beds. Tomorrow, the zebras will nap all day, the monkeys will plot new mischief, and you'll do it all over again. Because on the ark, nighttime isn't for sleeping. It's for stampedes, monkey business, and the realization that sometimes survival means learning to sleep with one eye open. You find a quiet corner and pray, not for patience, but for dry socks. You wonder if God is listening, or just waiting to see if you'll invent the world's first umbrella. Faith on the ark is a daily exercise in hope, humility, and the desperate longing for something, anything, that isn't soggy. You try to carve out a moment of peace, away from the bleating, braying, and the ever-present squelch of your own footsteps. You kneel on a patch of straw, damp of course, close your eyes, and send up a prayer. Not for wisdom, not for strength, just for the simple, impossible miracle of dry socks. You remember the days before the Iwa flood, when prayers were for rain, for crops, for peace in the village. Now, your prayers are more specific. Please let the goats sleep through the night. Please let the elephants hold it until morning. Please, just one day without stepping in something mysterious. But mostly, you pray for dry land. You imagine the feeling of solid earth beneath your feet, the sun on your face, and the glorious, forgotten sensation of dryness. You promise all sorts of things in exchange. You'll be kinder, more patient. You'll never take a sunny day for granted again. You even consider inventing the umbrella, just in case this is a test of ingenuity. Sometimes, you wonder if God is listening. Maybe he's waiting to see if you'll crack, or if you'll finally figure out how to waterproof your sandals. Maybe he's just as curious as you are about how long it takes for a human to turn into a raisin from the inside out. Noah, ever the faithful leader, gathers everyone for evening prayers. He thanks God for safety, for sustenance, for the promise of a new beginning. You nod along, but your mind drifts to the state of your feet. You sneak a glance at your socks, still damp, still clinging to hope. You try to keep your faith strong. After all, you've made it this far. The rain can't last forever. The animals, the smells, the endless mush, they're all temporary. Someday, the dove will return with an olive branch, the ark will come to rest, and you'll step out into a world washed clean. Until then, you pray. For patience, for strength, for dry socks, for a sign, a rainbow, or even just a break in the clouds. You hold on to hope, because on the ark, faith is the only thing that isn't waterlogged. And when the day finally comes, when you feel the sun, see the land, and wring out your last pair of socks, you'll know your prayers were heard, even if the answer was just a little longer. One morning, the dove comes back with an olive branch. Everyone cheers. You're not sure if you're more excited about dry land or the chance to finally air out your tunic. After endless days of grey skies and soggy socks, hope arrives not with a trumpet blast, but with the soft flutter of wings. The dove, previously just another Ark passenger with a penchant for side-eye, suddenly becomes the hero of the hour. She swoops in, olive branch in beak, and the entire Ark erupts in celebration. Noah drops his hammer mid-repair and lets out a whoop that echoes through the rafters. The animals gather around, craning necks and twitching whiskers, as if they all understand the significance. You stare at the little green sprig, heart pounding, and realize you might actually get to see something other than rain and wood grain. The joys of hope, dry land, the promise of solid ground, real dirt, and maybe even a patch of grass to roll in. You can almost feel the sun on your face and the mud between your toes. Fresh air, the shaj, fantasy of a breeze that doesn't smell like goat, and the chance to finally open a window without risking a flood. Laundry day, the dream of hanging your tunic in the sun, letting it dry all the way, and maybe even banishing that flooded barn scent for good. A moment of reflection. You realize it's not just about the olive branch, it's about what it means. The end of waiting, the beginning of something new. Proof that yes, there is a world beyond the Ark, and you're almost there. Celebration, Ark style. The goats try to eat the olive branch, of course. The monkeys start a conga line. Even the lions look a little less grumpy. Noah gathers everyone for a moment of thanks, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you believe that the storm really will end. You squeeze your damp tunic and grin, already planning your first post-flood laundry day. The rain stops. The door opens. You step out into a world that's all mud and promise. You take a deep breath, grateful for fresh air, sunshine, and the fact that you never have to share a room with a skunk again. After what feels like a lifetime of drizzle, drips, and damp socks, the Ark finally shudders to a halt. The rain is gone. The sun peeks through the clouds, shy and golden, as if it's not quite sure it's welcome. Noah gives the all clear, and the great door creaks open, groaning in protest after months of being sealed tight. You're the first in line, clutching your bundle of soggy belongings, heart pounding with anticipation. The animals crowd behind you, a stampede of fur, feathers, and pent-up energy. The goats are practically vibrating. The elephants trumpet. Even the chickens look excited, and they've seen it all. Mud. So much mud. You sink up to your ankles with your very first step, but you don't care. It's real earth, squishy, messy, gloriously alive. You wiggle your toes and laugh, not even minding when you lose a sandal to the muck. Fresh air. You inhale deeply, savoring the crisp, clean scent of a world washed new. No more eau de wet dog. No more mysterious Ark funk. Just the smell of promise and petrichor. Sunshine. Warmth spills over your face and shoulders, and you close your eyes, letting it soak in. You'd almost forgotten what it felt like. You silently vow never to complain about a sunburn again. The animals pour out behind you, each one reacting to freedom in their own way. The lions stretch and yawn, blinking at the bright sky. The rabbits dart off, leaving a trail of tiny muddy footprints. The goats immediately start climbing the nearest hill and each other. The doves take flight, circling overhead in a burst of white wings. You watch them scatter, feeling a strange mix of relief and nostalgia. You'll miss some of them, maybe even the chickens, but you're definitely not going to miss sharing a room with a skunk. You look around at the endless, muddy landscape. It's not perfect. It's not easy, but is yours. A blank canvas, waiting for new stories, new adventures, and maybe, just maybe, a dry place to sleep. You turn to Noah, who's standing in the doorway, smiling like a man who's seen too much and survived anyway. He claps you on the back, and together you step forward, leaving the ark and all its chaos behind. You survived the flood, the smells, the leaks, and the lice. Now, at last, you get to start again. Muddy, hopeful, and finally, gloriously free.